Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to yet another episode of CoinNewsExtraTv interview session, a program where we invite innovators, stakeholders, influencers in the blockchain, crypto, and fintech ecosystem to come air their view. So, a lot of conversations in the blockchain and fintech ecosystem. So, today we're going to be looking at CBDC. I know a lot of conversation have been around this. Nations, Apex banks are really looking towards adoption of CBDC, that's the central bank digital currency. So today on the conversation, we'll be looking at the future and rate of adoption of CBDC. I have with my guest who's going to be throwing more light on this, Dr. Oriol, who is the founder and host Digital Tomorrow podcast, and is also a future tech advisor. You're welcome to the show, Oriol.
Much. The pleasure is mine, Lee.
It's a pleasure to have you. How is Barcelona today?
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. A bit cold today, but it's okay.
Interesting. Before we move to the conversation, so this conversation is going to be between 10 to 15 minutes. So we're going to we'll try to manage our time. So we'd like to get a brief about yourself and your background, Dr. Oriol.
Sure. First and foremost, I would like to invite anyone watching us to follow me on my social media, LinkedIn. You can check my YouTube channel as well. I run this podcast, Digital Tomorrow. But basically, I work as the founder and co-host of a Digital Tomorrow podcast, and I work as a fintech advisor as well. I am also a board director and secretary general at the Global Impact Fintech Forum, chairman at the Digital Euro Association Private Digital Euro Working Group. And in general, I'm quite involved in the fintech area. And more specifically, one of my main areas of focus has been that of CBDCs and stable coins for the past few years.
Just joining us is still CoinNewsExtraTv interview session. So today we are looking at the future and rate of adoption of CBDC. So do well if you are joining us on any of our social media, on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Do well to share because one of the things we know that is important in this ecosystem is information. And so please do well to share this live broadcast so that we can get to many more people who really need this information. So back to you, Dr. Oriol. How would you rate the rate of adoption? How will you rate it from your own point of view, the adoption of CBDC by Apex banks?
Well, I would say that CBDCs are still at a very early stage, So this is why we cannot say that many countries have already effectively adopted them because they are still in an initial early stage. That being said, we've seen some countries moving faster than the others. The Bahamas became in October 2020, more than 2 years ago, the first country to actually implement, launch a CBDC in the modern era. And Nigeria came later too, with the Naira. China launched their digital yuan last year. So as you can see, we are seeing more countries adopting CBDCs, but we are still in a research phase. What I mean in most cases, what I mean by that is that we usually say that more than 85% of central banks in the world are working on CBDCs. But when we say working on CBDCs, what we mean by that is that they are in some cases doing pilots, doing research. It doesn't mean that they are already launching their CBDCs. In some cases they have, as I said, Nigeria, China, Bahamas. In some other cases, well, they are still doing some initial research. It doesn't mean that in the end they will launch it or not. We need to see. But my forecast, I foresee that many countries will in the end launch their own CBDC for sure.
Interesting. Let's look at some of the nations, like you mentioned, China, Nigeria, we know very well, and some other countries that have really come up with their own central bank digital currency. How has it been, the adoption? How has the adoption and acceptance been for those nations? If I know you've been looking into that.
Indeed. I think it's a great question, actually. Well, when it comes to Nigeria, I mean, I'm sure that you know it much better than I do, no, being based in Nigeria. I know that initially INAIRA encountered some technical problems. Then when it comes to the Bahamas, well, I think it's interesting. The penetration is still low in the Bahamas, as far as I know, based on the information we got from the Central Bank of the Bahamas and the information we got from people who went there recently. I mean, what I know is that it's not yet common to use the sand dollar in the Bahamas. The penetration is still low, but still it's a work in progress. No, I mean, I don't think that no one expected things to go well, that fast. No, I don't think that anyone expected this to be like an overnight process. Then when it comes to China, well, I think that China to me is perhaps uh, I'm not going to say the most interesting, but yeah, a very relevant case in the sense that well, China being the world's number 2 economy and according to many set to become the number 1 in a few years, them taking the advantage, to launch their CBDC much faster than any other country in the West, put them in an interesting position, because it allows them to study what they are doing with digital yuan and how they're acting. And well, I think China has been doing some interesting moves. As I said before, China launched digital yuan on the iOS and Android platforms 1 year ago. They launched the digital yuan app. This year, though, we cannot talk about a massive deployment yet. No, I mean, they are taking things slowly, but it makes sense. Launching a CBDC, making it successful, it takes time. It's quite interesting as well that recently the People's Bank of China included China's digital yuan in the calculations of the amount of currency in circulation in December, which is quite interesting. So if you compare the amount of digital yuan in circulation over the total amount of money in circulation, and the amount is still very low. I mean, we're talking only about 0.13%, 0.13% of the total amount of money in circulation in China is the digital yuan. So as we can see, it's still a slow penetration. But I don't mean by that it's being a failure or anything like that. It's simply a slow process. China is taking this slowly because, I mean, we all know that CBDCs actually, I mean, affect monetary policy. They can affect financial stability. So it is very important for a country to be very sure before launching any CBDC, and even when it's launched, to take things slowly, because China's digital yuan, for example, is not there to compete with WeChat Pay, Alipay, these payment apps that are already so successful in mainland China. The idea is to provide this third alternative for payments in China. So this is why we need to look at this from this angle of try to analyze what changes are taking place. Not so much if we look at the global numbers, but we need to try to keep this open mind, and try to analyze what changes are made. Because I mean, if we study this from this perspective, we see that many changes are taking place also in China. So to sum up your question, Lee, I would say that the adoption in the 3 countries that I mentioned is still not very high, but it's normal because CBDCs, even in those countries, even having been deployed in these countries, they are still at a very early stage. So I would say that they're going quite well. I mean, especially in China, I think digital yuan is doing actually very well, despite the figures which may seem misleading.
Still CoinNewsExtraTv interview session. We're talking about future and rate of adoption of CBDC with Dr. Oriol Cadovela. So we'll go for a very short break. When we return, we'll continue with the conversation. Do not go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. It's still CoinNewsExtraTv interview session. We are looking at our future and rate of adoption of central bank digital currency (CBDC). So we have had some conversations so far with Oriol. So let me look at to you, Oriol. How do you analyze some of these challenges that nations are facing when it comes to adoption of CBDC? We see that even in Nigeria, they have rolled out their own CBDC, e-Naira, there have not been much adoption by citizens when it comes to the e-Naira. So likewise, other places where CBDC has been launched. What would you say is the challenges that have caused this?
Mm. Well, first of all, I would say that whenever a country, a central bank, decides to work on a CBDC, they need to be very sure that they are not affecting in any negative way their financial stability, also their monetary policy. It is very important because, I mean, a CBDC um, may affect negatively their financial stability, their monetary policy. So any central bank needs to be very sure that they got this area covered, that they are sure before launching any CBDC that this CBDC will not affect, at least not in any negative way, these two areas that I just mentioned. On top of that, there is also the fact that we need to try to see whether that country, the citizens of that country, are used to making electronic payments or not. It will be easier, it will always be easier to launch a CBDC in a country whose citizens are already used to making electronic payments instead of using cash, for example. And then there is also the topic of the being able to build a network of merchants that accepts and encourages the use of CBDCs, then interoperability as well with the traditional banking system. There are several challenges, and then we can talk, of course, about the technical aspects per se, what technology to use, how to use it. Then there are other topics like privacy, which are also hot topics. So challenge-wise, there are many challenges before deploying a CBDC and even after having deployed that one. However, I wouldn't say that any of these challenges separately has been the reason why the adoption rate in those countries that I said before is still low. I think it makes perfect sense, especially when it comes to China, because China is the case that I know the beta. I would say that in China, it makes sense that those figures are still low. I mean, we're talking about new products, new ideas, no? So we cannot expect any CBDC to become like massively used by a very large amount of people like overnight. It takes time for CBDCs to become that widely used, but I'm sure that we'll get there. And especially when it comes to China's digital yuan, we will see that this situation, this scenario where people will use it much more massively than now in the years to come. But it's a process that takes time, and then there will be a phase two. We are not still yet, but there will be a phase two, and I think that's interesting, which is that related to interoperability between different CBDCs.
Okay, let's look at the future. Looking at this, we've seen some nations have really adopted CBDC. How do you see, from your own point of view, how do you see CBDC? Is there a future for it? Do you see massive adoption?
Yes, I do. Because of many reasons. First of all, CBDCs are not cryptocurrencies. What I mean by that is that even though some people, especially on the media, they tend to present CBDCs as something that will fight cryptocurrencies in order to destroy them, or these kind of ideas. I completely disagree. CBDCs, they serve different purposes than that of cryptocurrencies. This is why, ideally, in the future, we will see in many countries, as long as those countries wish to, CBDCs coexisting with cryptocurrencies. The only overlap perhaps will come from the area of stable coins. It is true that there are many more overlaps between CBDCs and stable coins, but generally speaking, the broad idea would be that CBDCs will coexist with cryptocurrencies. This is like idea number one. Then, aside from that, I would say as well that many more countries will adopt their CBDCs. As I said before, it's a long process. It takes years. Therefore, many of those countries that are currently testing their CBDCs will eventually decide to launch their own CBDCs. Some will not, but most of them will. This is what I foresee. So this is why we will see many more countries launching their own CBDCs. Initially, after being launched, we'll see what's happening in China. Their adoption will be, for a while, still low, but this adoption will get higher. And there will be a phase 2, which is related to what I said before when I was ending your previous question, which is interoperability between different CBDCs. Right now, we are still in phase 1, we could say, in this phase where the different central banks are working on their own CBDCs, like more domestically. Then in phase number 2, we will see different CBDCs like being interoperable. For example, I think that's quite interesting. Last week, I think it was on Friday, the Universal Digital Payments Network was launched at Davos during the Davos Summit. And well, it's interesting because the UDPN, Universal Digital Payments Network, for stable coins and digital and CBDCs and central bank digital currencies, aims to provide interoperability between CBDCs and stable coins in the same way that it will be possible to see different CBDCs being interoperable. One of the key elements for me when it comes to China's digital yuan is the idea behind China to try to internationalize the yuan, thanks to the digital yuan in Africa, in the Silk and Road, in the Belt and Road Initiative countries, in the RCEP countries as well, in the Free Trade Agreement countries. So this is why I think that the interoperability between different CBDCs will become key in the years to come.
Interesting. Before we draw the curtain on today's episode of CoinNewsExtra interview session, Dr. Oriol, I would like to get your closing remarks.
Sure. Just to sum up, I would say that to me, CBDCs are not the same as cryptocurrencies, which means that the coexistence between CBDCs and cryptocurrencies is possible and will be possible. Therefore, we do not need to see CBDCs as something that will destroy or fight cryptos. To me, they serve different purposes. And CBDCs will be launched in many more countries in years to come. They have been launched already in a few countries. The adoption may still be low, but it will become higher and higher as soon as time goes by.
An amazing conversation with you, Dr. Oriol Kadevela, a fintech advisor, founder, and host Digital Tomorrow podcast. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you for our audience. Thank you for your time as well. Do well to like the program. And also, we have another program that is coming up by 3 p.m. West African time, which is Crypto X-Ray, a program where we're going to talk about the scams and the laundries and all the other illicit activities that are happening in the crypto and blockchain ecosystem. Don't miss that program. We'll be live shortly. Thank you for your time, and thank you. See you.
Thank you.